Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. Happy New Year, happy 2021. Today we're going to be talking about just that, how to finally write your book in 2021. I think this is going up before New Year, so maybe it'll be a good one to get you thinking in the last couple days of the year. It is a very common New Year's resolution that people set to finally write their book in the new year. If this is your New Year's resolution and your goal is to write your book, I hope that this video will help you actually achieve that. Now, this video is definitely geared for people who haven't actually finished a first draft before. If you're really familiar with your process and you've written books before, you probably know how to approach your yearly goals. And there are a lot of different ways to write a book. Different processes are abound. Personally, even I do many things that are commonly advised against. My writing process is full of things that you're not supposed to do, and that's totally okay. Whatever works for you, if it works for you, it works for you, right? So I'm not here to tell you how to write your book or what process you should use, or even how long it should take you to write your book. Instead, my goal is to give you a few tips that you can implement to make sure you actually get your book written. How do you stick to your goal? How do you actually follow through with this goal so that at the end of the year, a year from now, you've got a completed first draft? We do have some videos on how to write a first draft and how to figure out your writing process. I'll leave those for you to check out. But the tips in this video are to help you actually see your goal through to the end, not to walk you through the different stages in how to write a book, because those stages are going to be different for every person. Step number one is to start early, as in early January. Probably the biggest mistake you can make when approaching a yearly writing challenge is to view January as a free pass and think, it's so early in the year, I don't have to get started, I still have the whole year left. Because then that'll transfer to February, and then that'll transfer to March. Suddenly it's July, but you're thinking, oh, it's fine, I still have half the year. Suddenly it's the fall, and now you're thinking, I guess I'll just leave it for next year. Time moves much faster than you think it does in January. So if your goal is to write a book this year, start writing that book in January, ideally in the first week of January. The sooner you start, the easier it'll be to start, I promise you. Speaking from personal experience, I had several writing goals for the year. I achieved all but one of them. And the one that I ended up not achieving was also the smallest. It was just to rewrite a short story. And I had these other goals that felt more pressing, like I wanted to finish writing a book and start another book. And as the year went on, I kept focusing on these big goals, and this little short story I wanted to rewrite was at the back of my mind. And I kept going, oh, it's just a rewrite of a short story. I can do that in a week. And I kept just putting it off, because I was like, oh, I'll have time for that later, I'll have time for that later, I'll have time for that later. I never got to it later. I ended up never getting to it because I just kept putting it off. It was my smallest goal of the year. It was the easiest one to achieve, and it's the only writing goal I didn't meet this year. And it's because I didn't start early. I would have had time to start this. I should have just done it in the first quarter of the year. Instead I put it off. Probably not gonna end up doing it this year. So learn from my mistakes, start your goals early, and especially if your goal is to write a whole book. That was a short story and I didn't even get it done, okay? Don't put off writing your whole book. Step number 2. Break your year into smaller chunks. Try breaking your year into thirds, quarters, or even 6 sections of 2 months. Then plan out what you want to do in each of those sections. How you end up slicing the year into pieces might depend on how many tasks you want to get to, so break it down based on what makes most sense for you. For example, you might dedicate the first quarter of the year to planning your book, the middle 2 quarters of the year to drafting it, and the final quarter to starting your editing process. It's very hard to pace your goals when you look at the whole year, but much easier when you're thinking about what you can get done in segments of a couple months at a time. Then, of course, when you get to each new section of the year, so you get to your new quarter, then you want to set goals for what you're going to do in each individual month. Step number 3, plan challenges. If you want to participate in a NaNoWriMo event or just a self-led writing challenge, plan for those at the start of the year. The thing with NaNoWriMo, or National Novel Writing Month, which is a yearly writing challenge that takes place in November, is that it is great motivation. It's great motivation, but it takes place so late in the year that if you're thinking that that's going to be when you get your writing done, you'll be leaving your writing to November, and you don't want to do that. Instead, try taking some of those principles and maybe applying them to your process earlier in the year, Or think about a specific writing project or specific writing goal that you want to tackle during November, but don't leave all your writing until then. Don't think, oh, you know, I can just leave it till NaNoWriMo. I'll be doing NaNoWriMo, so I don't have to start till then. Step number 4, expect tasks to take longer than expected. Especially if this is your first time writing a book, it will probably take longer than you're anticipating. Now, there's a principle for this in psychology. I would have to look it up. I forget what it's called and I forget the exact figures. Basically, tasks take on average, it's either like 20 or 30% longer than we think they're going to take. So if you think you can write a whole book in, I don't know, 4 months, probably it'll take 20 to 30% longer than that, if not more. Plus, let's all learn from 2020. Did 2020 go the way any of us thought it would? Build some buffers into your schedule, because if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that everything can go wrong. If you plan your schedule super tightly with no wiggle room, no buffer room whatsoever, something is going to come up and throw you completely off schedule. So plan for things to go wrong. That's inevitable, that's life. It's hard to go through a year, maybe impossible to go through a year without some things going wrong. If you build your schedule to be so tight that if one thing goes wrong, you're completely thrown off, you're gonna be so thrown off your game when things inevitably get thrown off, that it might be hard to recover. Step 5, find a way to keep yourself on track and to track your progress. Now, as you become more familiar with your writing process, you can rely more and more on what I call your inherent motivation to write. This is just the fact that on any given day you want to write because you enjoy writing. It's very hard to rely on that as a new writer. With practice, you'll kind of learn your process's natural up and downs and how to navigate them, maybe with less scheduling or less goal setting, or you'll learn that you do want more scheduling or goal setting. It takes time to familiarize yourself with that, but if you go in as a new writer, having never written a book, with the idea that you're just gonna write whenever, when you feel like it, you probably will not end up writing the book. So try and find a way to keep yourself on track. One thing I found really useful when I was a newer writer was just tracking my word count. I had a notebook and every day I just wrote how many words I'd written that day. Super simple, but I found that intentionality of writing down what I had gotten done each day was actually really motivational, and if I didn't write, I would have to write a 0, and I would just, man, I hated having to write a 0. It was the worst. But it also made me very aware of the days that I wasn't writing. So that is definitely a strategy I would recommend. It also just helps you become more well acquainted with your workflow, because you can see how much you tend to write. And you actually have like documentation and data that you can look at. Some people also implement goal and reward systems, which is totally a great option if you feel like you need kind of an extra push of motivation. Number 6. Don't attempt it alone. One of the best ways to stay on track is just to write with a buddy. If you know anyone else who's trying to write a book in the year, see if there's a way that you can motivate each other and keep each other on track. Maybe make a schedule for when you're gonna exchange work or when you're gonna check in with each other to see if you're reaching your goals. And finally, step number 7 is to not let a setback set you back. A lot can happen in a year. There's bound to be some kind of setback along the way. Now, of course, take the time you need to deal with any personal situation that comes up. Don't put more pressure on yourself than necessary to get your book written during hard times. However, don't let yourself get into the habit of letting any little setback along the way throw you off. Lots of people start writing their book, and as soon as it gets hard, which does not take very long, they give up entirely. I promise it's not a problem with your book if you start writing and after a couple weeks or even a couple days, suddenly it starts to feel more difficult. This happens to pretty much every writer with every book. It's very common for the beginning to be the easiest part to write because it's when you're the most motivated. I can speak from personal experience. I'm currently writing my 11th book and I've written upwards of 30 short stories. And not a single one of them just kind of went off without a hitch. All of them have included some kind of setback, some kind of struggle, and for all of the longer projects, all of the novels, probably multiple major roadblocks along the way. This is normal, but you have to be ready to deal with your process at its lowest points, not just when everything is going smoothly. Things won't just go smoothly the entire time. A book is a long piece of art to create. It's many words, many pages. It's not gonna just go smoothly, but that's okay. In order to finish the book, you've got to be ready to deal with the most difficult parts of the process and the most difficult parts of the story. It won't be smooth sailing all the way through, I can pretty much guarantee you that, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a problem with you or your book, it's kind of just the nature of writing a book. So don't expect it to be smooth sailing the entire way. When you start writing your book for the first week and it's super fun and super easy, don't expect for it to be like this the whole way, but don't bail as soon as things get tough. This is probably the most common reason why people don't finish their books, is because they bail as soon as it gets hard, which is going to be probably pretty soon. I find usually I can write 10-ish thousand words and then things start to get more difficult. That's just how writing a book is. You just have to learn to push through the tough parts, push through the roadblocks, push through the writer's blocks or whatever. I'll leave our video on the different types of writer's block and how to deal with them in the description, since my guess is one of those problems will arise at some point. You've got to just learn how to deal with it and be willing to deal with it when you set out to write a book. If it is your goal to write a book in 2021, especially if it's your first book, please let me know in the comments. Obviously, it's not my goal to write my first book in 2021, but I do have a few pretty huge writing goals for 2021. I want to finish drafting the novel that I'm drafting, and I also want to finish editing the novel that I'm editing and start querying it, which is very exciting. So whatever your writing goals are for the year, whether it's to write a book or not, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time.